Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you now. Dr. Erin Bellamy is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out her first appearance on episode 732 of Balanced Body Radio. Dr. Erin Louise Bellamy, MHP, is the founder of Integrative Ketogenic Research and Therapies, which uses principles of metabolic psychiatry to provide remote, highly personalized one on one metabolic therapy for both psychiatric conditions and overall metabolic health. Her programs go as far as treating psychiatric conditions such as depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia, as well as overall metabolic health. Her mission is to empower individuals with comprehensive education, expert guidance, and consistent support in the understanding and practical application of metabolic interventions, including ketogenic metabolic therapy, to promote enhanced physical and mental well being. Ketones have been shown to protect the brain and reduce inflammation and can be utilized to increase mitochondria and improve metabolic health, which in turn can have positive impacts on both physical and mental well-being. You can find Dr. Erin Bellamy on Twitter at IKRT_org or on her site at www.ikrt.org. Erin Bellamy, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you so much, Casey. Thank you for having me back. It's an absolute pleasure. We had a great conversation last time. I'm just so excited to be back about a year later to talk to
About
you
a year
some more.
later. Yeah, we were just talking offline how quickly this last year has gone and how many changes you've gone through and all the things that you've been able to implement, which I'm so excited to chat with you today. I had a lovely time chatting with you last time, and I know this will be a really fun conversation. This is a really great question for the end of a podcast, not necessarily for the beginning of a podcast, but it's great for the end. And I'm so glad I got to hear you recently on the Metabolic Link podcast, and host Victoria Field asked you this question towards the end. I love the question. And you had said it had actually been one of the very first times you'd ever heard the question and got to respond to it. And she said, for somebody that works so hard in this field, metabolic psychiatry, you're doing so many things, you're doing studies, you're working with people clinically, there's always new stuff coming out that you have to learn about and stay on top of, so many things. What is your personal link to all of this to make you so motivated to keep doing it? I thought she asked an incredible question. I loved your answer. So we're going to start out with a great question for the end of a podcast. We're going to start with that. So for you personally, why do you work so hard in this field?
Yeah, thank you, Casey. And so you're right. When I heard that, I I was kind of expecting that somebody would ask me it eventually, but I didn't think it would take so many podcasts for somebody to ask me. Um, but you know, unlike some other people within the field, I'm fortunate enough to not have that direct personal experience with poor mental health. And so, one would then think, well, what are you doing? Why have you now decided to commit your career to this? And it's because when I was working in the National Health Service in the UK, which, if you remember from our last conversation, I'd spent about 4 or 5 years working on the psychiatric inpatient units there with people who were really, really unwell. It, that left a lasting mark on me. And, I made some great relationships with some of the patients there. Unfortunately, the way the mental health system works is, people and then the way people feel is, people are unwell. If they're unwell to the point that there's a danger to their life or a danger to somebody else's life, they come into the wards where I was working, and then they hopefully get a little better and then they get discharged. But more often than not, people either stay a really long time, I mean months to years, or they feel a little bit better and then they're discharged, but then very soon they come back again. And so over the 4 or 5 years that I was there, I was making long lasting relationships with the patients that were on my ward because I was seeing them every day. I was working 12, 14-hour shifts, multiple times a week, doing the night shifts, everything. You build relationships with these people. And, you know, there were a couple of people that I was particularly close to, mainly like the older generation. There were some people kind of in their 60s and early 70s who, this is no surprise, to many of your listeners, they'd been struggling with their mental health their whole life. And so the ward had pretty much become their home. They knew all the staff very, very well. The staff were fond of them. we still had our professional boundaries, of course, but you know, they're living on the ward for long periods of time. And so I got to know them, you know, I got to hear one particular elderly man, you know, I knew for probably 3 out of the 5 years I was there, and I got to know all about his Scottish background and his heritage, and you know, the people that came in and out of his life. And I would take him to I would take him out to the shops, or I would take him to his flat to pick up his post, and you know, I like help to clean his flat. Like all of these things, you just end up building these really tight relationships with these people who society has kind of forgotten about. And not seeing those people get better despite everything we were doing, just watching them come in and out and in and out, and knowing that the psychiatric ward is no place to call home. Um, and yet that's pretty much how it was for them. That at this point, knowing what I know now about how effective ketogenic therapy can be and seeing the results that I'm seeing, I just don't want anybody to have to end up in that system, coming in and out of that system, or ending up in that system for a long period of time, if I can help it. And finally, there is something now at our fingertips that I think can help to prevent people from ending up, you know, on those wards, and that's ketogenic therapy. So that's why I'm so focused, because had those individuals had access to this care 20, 30, 40 years ago, back when that pilot study came out, you know, the one we spoke about last time, their life could have been completely different.
Yeah.
And to know that so many of them are no longer with us, that that hurts a lot, you know? So that's what drives me. When I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, it's early, you know, that's what I think of. I think about them, and I think about why I'm doing this, and that's what it is. It's to stop people from having, you know, from having that kind of end of life period.
It's a beautiful answer. I really appreciate that. And yeah, we don't know what we don't know, right? You can't time travel back and let them know. It's not something you were taught at the time. I think about the same thing. 20 years ago, my mom passed away of breast cancer, and we were doing low fat diets and tons of carbohydrates. Knowing what I know now, it'd be very interesting to go back and see, you know, would that change course? I don't know, but it's interesting to ponder, and it's cool to use that as your mission moving forward and continue to help people. So I really love that. And you mentioned the study. I know you've repeated your story many times, including on our show, but you know what? I don't even care, because it's one of my favorite stories ever. You can go into as much detail as you like. I love your story of how you got into this work. Could you please share that with us again? I think that the audience will really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I can put a slightly different spin on it. Um,
Perfect.
you know, I again, magical things happened on this ward. You know, I was working in the NHS, you know, for those couple of years. So this is back in 2014, 2015. And it was about the same time that New Atkins for New You was coming out. And I mean, there's always a new diet on the horizon, you know, and everybody gets excited about it. So this kind of low carb diet was all the rage back then. And, you know, I kind of came across it one night when I was working on a night shift. Things were quiet, and, you know, I was just having a bit of a read. And I had noticed that a lot of the research that was on this diet was like, oh, you know, type 2 diabetes, it seems to be regulating blood glucose levels, and you know, the secondary outcomes seem to be that people feel better. Like, yeah, go figure. Like, people feel better because they're losing weight, or they're feeling better because their glucose levels are regulated. That makes sense. But then the further I went digging down my PubMed search, you know, the more I came across, you know, regardless of blood sugar regulation, and regardless of, you know, type 2 diabetes moving into remission with a low carb ketogenic diet, they were still seeing improvements in psychological well-being and mood. So when they looked at the statistics and they separated it out, you know, despite the other improvements, there were standalone improvements in mood and psychological well-being. And I thought, well, a bit silly because that's a diet. You know, how could the diet do that? And I think so many, you know, of your listeners and of people around the world are like, diet, like what diet, what's diet got to do with improved mental well-being and psychological health? And then I kept searching and I came across the term ketogenic, which at the time didn't make any sense to me. Ketogenic, got a weird K in it. The word is strange. I didn't know what a ketone was. So I was trying to figure out like, well, what's ketogenic? This is very strange. It's not like vegetarian or vegan or low carbohydrate. It's ketogenic. So I was like, what is this? I kept digging to learn about it. And then I came across that study. So there's that one paper from 1965. And yes, I'm repeating myself, but it was just the one paper that completely changed my life and set me off on this career path, because the paper showed how they had taken, this is, I think, the early 1960s, before it was published in 1965. They had taken 10 women, all of whom had what we would call now as treatment-resistant schizophrenia. You know, they had hallucinations and delusions. They were in treatment, so they were having ECT, they were on a hospital ward, they were not improving. And so they took them and they introduced a ketogenic diet, poorly controlled. You know, it wasn't like we would do now with macro calculators and food lists and things like this. It was poorly controlled. They removed the gluten, they removed the dairy, they removed a lot of the carbohydrates, put them into ketosis for 2 weeks. And at the end of the 2 week period, 7 out of 10 of those women saw significant improvements in their symptoms, their hallucinations, delusions went away. Yes, you could argue, okay, it's only 10 people, but still 7 out of 10 of those people, they saw those improvements. Then what they did is they reintroduced the standard diet. So they just went back to the diet that they had been feeding them on the ward prior, and all of the hallucinations, delusions, symptoms came back. And so that's pretty telling. Whether it's the ketones or the removal of the gluten or the removal of the dairy, there is something there that is improving the symptoms for 7 out of 10 of those women when nothing else was working. And not even super high levels of ketosis, because there was, even in the report, it said, you know, somebody was getting sweets snuck into them. So we don't even know how ketotic that person was. But still, those improvements we had never seen in the research prior to that. And that was the paper. I read that and I thought, oh my gosh, this ketogenic diet, there's something here. This might be able to put, you know, to help schizophrenia, to help depression, to help anxiety, to help mania, you know. Let's see where this trail leads me. And I searched and I searched and I searched and I searched. And there was nothing. All there was in the 1970s, a couple of papers on, is schizophrenia rare if carbohydrates and grains are rare? In other words, somebody had gone out to Papua New Guinea and those islands, and they had found lower rates of schizophrenia in places where the Western diet had not been introduced. And that was kind of it. Until, you know, the past 10 or so years, and now it's starting to pick up. But that's because psychiatry went off in a different direction. It went off down, you know, down the road of antidepressants, antipsychotics, medications, taking a pill for every ill. You know, that's the route that it went down. It didn't continue researching the route of using a dietary intervention. But as soon as I saw that, I was off to the races. And, you know, ever since then, ever since I read that paper, I've been adamant on figuring out if this works. And I think at this point, a lot of the research and a lot of my clinical practice is showing that it's working for many. And now we just need to continue to, you know, publish these big studies to see exactly who it does work for and how many of those people it works for too. So hopefully
Wow.
I
I love
wasn't
that
sure.
story. I love it. Are you familiar with Christina Cook on primarily on Twitter? She's from Canada.
Yes, I don't I haven't followed her for very long, but I think only the past maybe 6, 7 months. Yes, she's been
Yeah,
around all
she's
right.
pretty new. Yeah, she's pretty new on the
Yeah.
scene. It was about a year ago that her daughter, who had suffered with terrible bipolar,
Yeah.
she was able to find metabolic therapies. Within weeks they got her off of all medications. She's been thriving. We just had her on for the second time recently. She made a tweet about a book that she had found. She was just
Elements
perusing
one.
around. Yeah, yeah. She's just perusing around her local thrift store, finds this used book that's 50 years old, and she opens the cover. It's something about nutrition and mental health or something. And even on like the cover sheet, it's like you can reverse schizophrenia. And its whole big book is all about it. Nobody knows about it. I've got a copy coming to me and I can't wait to check it out. But it's crazy to think that study was done. This book was made 50 years ago. We knew things from ancient cultures like ancient Greece and Rome with seizures and all kinds of stuff. And it was so cool the way you explained that, and unfortunate the way you explained it is like we chose a different route. We chose the medication route rather than the food route.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And actually, now that you've said that, it reminded me I did see her saying something about that book. And I thought, oh, I think I know that the author of that book. And I came
Uh,
running into my book, like my bookshelf, and there's another one called Nutrition and Mental Illness by the same author. I think it's Carl Fife.
that's
And
it.
yes, again, written back in the 70s. That was one of the earliest books that I found, and I was thinking, well, where, what happened next? Why did everything go quiet? But again,
Yeah.
it's because we took a different route. But it's been there the whole time, and now metabolic psychiatry, this new field, is yes, we are, and I say we because I'm part of that research group, doing some of this research. But yes, we're doing new studies and bringing people in and seeing if it works. But also, we're joining the dots. We're pulling information across disciplines that has been out there in the literature for over 100 years and pulling it all together and putting all the pieces together to form the final jigsaw puzzle. Because a lot of it's out there. It's just about bringing it together to make it make sense.
No, I love that. That's so amazing. Okay, I'm going to ask you another question. This is also stolen. I'm stealing all my questions today. This is stolen from Ali Houston, another mutual friend of ours. Lovely dude. He had Dr. Georgia Eid on his show several years ago and asked this question. I've since asked this question many times before. Before you found metabolic psychiatry, what would be a win? What working with somebody, what would be a really, really good case? And let's contrast to after you found metabolic psychiatry. What do you see in your day-to-day work? What is a win today?
Wow. Yeah, that actually reminds me of something I saw recently, which was an interview with some psychiatrists from, I think, from maybe the 1990s, and they were saying, how many of your patients have you cured? And I think all of them said zero, apart from one who hummed and hawed for a couple of minutes and then said maybe one. And if you have to hum and haw, you have not cured anybody. But to answer your question, what would have been a win? I mean, a win would have been discharging patients and not seeing them come back. But that's not a great win because you have no idea the kind of life that they are living on the outside, or if they're with the community team. Just because they don't make it all the way into the acute inpatient unit doesn't mean that they are thriving, and I mean, I've worked with people for so long where, we had the community get a house, like a new house for them so they could get supported accommodation and so on. I've been out and I've helped to fill up flats with microwaves and bed sheets and help them reintegrate into their new home, only for them within weeks to come back into the ward. So a win would be having them discharge and not come back, but my gosh, it's not much of a win. Um, compared to what I see now, I mean, really, Casey, it's like night and day. Today, within my group program, we were having a conversation and, going around answering questions. And somebody said, this is their 4th month. And they said, I wanted to throw in the towel so many times within the first 3 months because I just didn't think that it was working. But for the past 3 weeks, they said the depression that I've had for 78 years, 78 years, the depression that I've had has gone. And now I feel happy. And now I am scared of this happiness because I'm not sure how long it's going to last. But if I can live out the rest of my days feeling like this, it doesn't matter how long I've got because I feel great. And really, you can't compare the two. Like,
It's amazing.
it's unbelievable.
That's amazing. And knowing your work and how you work with people, it's not even like that was a story from today. That wasn't even a story like, oh, this was a standout from last year. This is like your daily work. It's so exciting. Going back to that very first question I asked you, like, why are you so personally invested in this? Of course, that one life being improved is worth all of it. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And when I have never seen anything else do that. I've seen people improve here and there with other therapies. Don't get me wrong, other therapies can and do work, right? But I have never seen something like this work this well. And then when it works this well, they then feel like they can go and do other therapies and engage in other therapies and then add those on top, which just strengthens them even more. It's, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
really, really wonderful place to be.
I
Yeah.
love that idea, and I love the way that you explained it. And that's the way I understand it as well. Is like, yeah, we have traditional therapies, and they may be able to do something, but when you're trying to apply those therapies in a very inflamed brain that isn't working correctly, your results are going to be extremely limited. What if we could take away that brain inflammation and then apply these therapies? Well, now they work amazing because you got to the root, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, exactly. And also think about often I hear it's usually once people are feeling better, then then they go back and they talk a little bit about how they were in the beginning and what they've done in the past that has or hasn't worked. And they put so much blame and shame on themselves about how the previous therapies didn't work or they weren't able to engage and how they always felt like a failure. And actually now that this is working, they feel like this is going to be pulled from underneath them because what if this fails? So, they've just had decades sometimes of trying something, it working for a time, but not really taking them the whole way there. And then they feel like a failure because they haven't been able to do it to the best of their ability, or they haven't been able to do it quote unquote perfectly, as if that even exists. And so you've got to like undo all of that shame as well then by the time they come to me, because that's just been there like as a string the whole way through. They just feel like they will constantly let themselves down. Whereas really, I just tell them, what did you expect? How could you expect your brain to fully engage in psychotherapy when your brain is so foggy? You have no motivation. You can't really get up in the morning and even, organize your breakfast and things like that. So how can you engage in psychotherapy and then implement the tools afterwards? That's bananas to expect that of yourself, you know? But then when you, like you said, you calm the brain down, give it some space, bring the brain fog down, bring the inflammation down, get the ketones up, and then suddenly things seem a little more manageable. And then you can engage in those things, and they want to engage in those other therapies,
It's amazing.
rather than feeling like they're forced to.
Yeah, such a better approach. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you, especially in like this past year since we've chatted, how much progress do you think we've made? I work with a dietitian, Rachel, who formerly worked with Dr. Lori. Oh, I can't Calabresi. Excuse me, Dr. Lori Calabresi. Rachel and I see each other a few times a week, and she was telling me that she just heard of a dietetics conference where Denise Potter was able to get on stage and moderate a chat. I can't remember who else was on stage, but it was people in the metabolic psychiatry ward or field, excuse me. And the place was packed. It was packed with more conventional dietitians and medical practitioners, and it was super well received from what I heard. They had tons and tons of questions. And as soon as they got off the stage, they were surrounded by lots of people asking questions. That was so optimistic and inspiring to me to hear that that is like catching on and people were curious about that. What have you noticed in the last year? Do you think our message is kind of catching on a little bit more? Are we making progress, or is it still a little bit slower than we would like?
I think it's always going to be slower than we would like, right? Because I think both you and I would say we want it now and we want it to be available for people now, even in the way that we have it. We don't know everything, but people should have access to it right away. So it's never going to be as fast as we would like, but I have been really impressed the past year by how quickly we have been moving. And I think it's a combination of things. We've got the research studies and the focus on the research. There's a lot of support and funding behind these research studies now, and these are international studies. Australia, the USA, Scotland, lots of studies across the globe, all working on ketogenic therapies for psychiatric conditions. Then we've got people like Denise Potter, people who have extensive experience being accepted, like you said, into these conferences, being able to get up and share what they've been doing and what they have found, and having that open conversation. And then we've also got, the Dr. Georgia Ede and Dr. Chris Palmer's books that, they were published a couple of years ago now. I think Dr. Palmer's came out in maybe 2022. And yet, pretty much everybody in my IKRT community has read both of those books. I meet people almost daily that have been reading those books. And so more and more people are picking that up and they are reading it and they are getting interested, because we have a mental health epidemic, right? The rates are skyrocketing, they're not stopping. And so people also want to find a way to help themselves before, they may even be on a waiting list for a diagnosis. They want to do something before they even get there. So I think because we've got lots of focus from lots of different areas coming together and moving at the same time, things are moving really quickly. And even compared to last year when I spoke to you, like I had just started doing a couple of my group programs, and the group programs are doing really, really well. There's over 60 people in my community now that are, supporting each other week on week, and it's just so wonderful to see. So we're moving fast. I know there's a lot more that can be done, and I know there's a lot in the works as well. And with all the people that we got together, everybody is so focused, either because they have a personal connection or a story like mine, that it's just full speed ahead until we can get this available for people in all different parts of the world, all different backgrounds, all different demographics. So
Yeah,
I'm excited. It's moving
good.
very, very fast. Yeah.
Good. Okay. That continues to make me very optimistic. And I do want to talk about your programs and your work. I know you've expanded a lot of things we want to update. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about at least one of the studies you put out last year, which I believe was a case study. You've probably worked on 6 or 7 different things that I'm unaware of. But yeah, can you tell us a little bit about some of the specific work you did this last year?
Yeah, absolutely. We can start there. So, um, I published an incredible case study of a 38-year-old woman who came to me at the end of last year. And she had a lot going on. So the title, the word transdiagnostic is in the title of this paper because she had multiple diagnoses: bipolar disorder, ADHD, binge eating, PTSD, depression, anxiety. And this is common, right? We see people with multiple diagnoses, and you never really know which one is priority, because all the symptoms are clustered together. So she came and she joined my group program. And when I collected the baseline measurements of, all of these different diagnoses, she was sky high on almost all of them. The highest PTSD scale or score I've ever seen. It was maxed out. One of the highest depression scores I've ever seen. She was really, really struggling. Very tearful and kind of like last, last resort. This is last chance saloon. Um, she joined the group program, And within a couple of weeks of her implementing ketogenic therapy, everything had improved. And sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes we see a drastic improvement and then things kind of come up and level out, right? Or it might kind of bob around a little bit. But then at 8 weeks and at 12 weeks, everything was just down at 0. And I didn't hear from her for a couple of weeks in that 12 weeks. And because of how she had been initially, I was worried. And I thought, oh, maybe she's dropped off, or maybe because we were kind of heading to the Christmas period, I was like, oh, maybe it's Christmas, or like chocolates, these things have kind of got in the way. And I had emailed her and I hadn't heard from her. And then I was like, oh, let me send another email. I have a funny feeling. I don't know what this is. So I emailed again and I was like, let's have a call, like just please communicate with me, let's talk about it. And she responded and she was just like, I'm so good, like I feel so good, finally I have my life back. Like she had put everything on hold. She was going back to study. She had opened up her private practice, like all of these things that she had absolutely not been able to do before. She had been debilitated by those symptoms. And then the scores that were down at 0, that's exactly how she felt. And I have never seen such an incredible case. It's definitely the best I've ever seen. And it represents, if we're thinking about progress on a bell curve, it's definitely over in the best of the best, right? Most people fall kind of in the middle, but it just shows the power of ketogenic therapy, because that's the only thing that she did. She brought her ketones well up into the therapeutic range and stayed there. It was difficult, but she did it and saw such incredible results. And you know what the best thing is? I presented at a conference a week and a half ago in Scotland, and she came, and I was able to present her case to everybody. And then I was able, with her permission, because she wants to share, her story with people now, I was able to say, here she is. She's right
Wow.
here. I mean, it was unbelievable and such a special moment, to meet her face to face, not just on Zoom, but also to have her there, saying, that's my story and I'm here and I'm still going, you know. So that was well received in the research community. There was a little bit of, oh, is that true, going on from people that are outside the field of metabolic psychiatry. That some people had said, oh, that's not possible, that's clinically implausible, but that's fine. We've got plenty of case studies and research coming through to show that it's not just one person, and that this is changing many people's lives for the better. But generally speaking, the overall response was really positive. Other case studies, yes, there have been some. I've collaborated with Nicole Laurent and some others to write up some other case studies on depression and bipolar disorder. And so really, I think that if we think about research as a pyramid, the bottom is, the case studies and the case series. I think that that's nearly full because we've, kind of published quite a lot there. And hopefully, the nice thing about those is people can relate. When it's a big study, wonderful, you get wonderful results and you learn a lot, but it doesn't tell you about, 38-year-old woman, mother of 3, dealing with XYZ. It really goes into detail. And I think people can connect with that and see themselves in some of those case studies and then think, okay, well, maybe that could be me, or maybe I should try this and see if I get a similar result. So I like the case studies for that. Yeah.
Wow, so beautiful. I just, that moment must have been incredible. You said, the case study's been well received and it seemed like it went well at the conference. Like, what kind of feedback did you get? Did people approach you afterwards, approach her afterwards, want to chat with her? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, they did. And she she wants to share her story far and wide, and she feels like she's at the point where she can do that. So, I think she was in her element, in that there were lots of people talking to her and asking her experience and that type of thing, which was just great to see. And then, on my side, the amount of people that come up to me afterwards and say, "Oh, that's me." Like, because obviously it was that I presented that, but then I presented other things that, that I've been learning from my programs or from my research, and lots of people just come up and say, "That's me, that's my story." Either they've been doing it on their own and they're seeing some improvements and they want more support, or they want a community because they feel like nobody understands what I'm doing and everybody wants me to eat everything, but I can't. So there's that. And then there's, "Oh, wow, that's my story that you've just told. And I've never felt so heard, and I've never felt so, kind of seen." And just to know that there might be something that could help when not many things have helped them up until this point. There's a lot of that. Some researchers, some psychiatrists coming up and, asking more about, wanting to learn more about metabolic psychiatry. And these days we've got so many resources, like you mentioned earlier, Metabolic Mind and so on. It's easy to kind of point people in that direction. But a lot of people interested in doing it themselves and looking for their tribe, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wonderful. Pushback you must get all the time when you present something like that, or, maybe feedback you got when this case study come out is like, okay, so what? This is one person. This is not a randomized controlled trial. Why would I start to jump in with some of this stuff when we can't prove that this is it? This is just one person's story. She might be right back to where she was next week. We don't know. So how do you respond to that when you get that?
Yeah. Well, I hold my breath. I take a minute and I just kind of take a breather. Um, no, because I see it all the time. I have to understand that other people don't. So I have to kind of bring myself around in that respect. You know, I just tell them that this is a signal. I'd like to say a lot more, right? Because of what I see every day, but I say this is a signal. Have you ever seen anybody with, like, hello, psychiatrist, how many people have you cured, right? Have you ever seen anybody with the highest PTSD, depression, ADHD, binge eating scores altogether? They may not have. If they have they ever given them an intervention where it went down to 0 in 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks? No, probably not. So it's a signal. It's just telling you and pointing you towards something that's happening. It's not saying it's going to be like that for everybody, but it's saying, "Hey, listen, current treatments aren't really working that well long term. We need something else. There's something over here that seems to be working for some people. And the more people we can, in case studies, the more people we can collect that have this kind of response, the higher the signal will be." And then it's simply, there's a signal there, and then it's worth putting our time, our energy, our focus, and our research pounds, punts, and dollars over there to see what that looks like in a randomized control trial. So it's pointing in that direction. It's a signal. That's how I explain it to people. I feel bad because it's also that individual's life that has been completely turned around. And to say it's just a signal, I don't think it's the nicest way of putting it, because actually it's a remarkable turnaround. Her whole life has gone from 0 to 100. But in terms of keeping things, academic and professional, it's a signal, and we have to look there and push our research towards that.
Yeah. And the more we do this, like you said, the more studies are piling up, and it's thousands at this point, thousands and thousands. It's like we invented cigarettes, people started smoking cigarettes, and before long, one person got lung cancer, and then maybe 10 people, and 100 people, and 1,000 people, and all these things. And they start to build up to the point that, like, well, we don't know. We really don't. Like, to this day, does smoking cause lung cancer? We really don't know. But the numbers are so great. It's like it's not plausible that it's any other thing. It has to be this one thing. And every day that goes by, like you said, there's more people that are getting connected and they're sharing their stories and things get published all the time. That's like, you're not going to be able to ignore this very much longer. And it's like you said earlier, which is so important. We're not saying this is the way for everybody to do this, full stop. That's it. No, we're just asking this to be an option. You could try this. You could try the medications, you could try therapies, many different things you could try. You could also try the diet. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. It's a low hanging fruit. Might as well try.
Yeah, exactly. And it's relatively risk-free if you do it properly, safely, and effectively. So why can't it be? Just like, a lot of these other therapies that people are using, like psilocybin or ketamine, like these other things. And really with the research with some of those is not even as strong, or doesn't cover 100 years like ketogenic therapy does, and yet they are better received than the ketogenic diet. But again, it's just options, and you should have the option and you should know about it. And when it comes to the cigarette, that's a great example, right? We're never going to test that. We're not going to say that group over there should smoke for 20 years so we can see if they do or do not get lung cancer. We will never know because you can't ethically do that study. We're not going to have that randomized control trial. But yet, with ketogenic therapy, we have an objective measure. We can test the ketones in the blood at any one time, multiple times a day if we wanted to. It's food, and we're not asking people to eat ultra processed foods or stick to one type of food. We're asking them to eat like an ancestrally appropriate diet that consists of protein and fat, which are essential for life, reducing and restricting carbohydrates that are not essential for life. And we're asking them to eat that food in a slightly funky ratio, which still gives you all your vitamins and minerals and everything like that if you're careful. We're asking them to do that. That's very different than asking people to smoke cigarettes for 20 years and seeing if they get lung cancer. Like, and we can measure the ketones with the Keto Mojo or whatever else. Like, I mean, sometimes I really just wonder why there's so much pushback, but that's a different discussion, I guess. But we have a very good way of doing it, and therefore it warrants it. It's not difficult to research this. And so that's why we are doing it. Finally, we're in the position where we can.
Yeah, amazing. Well, again, I want to deep dive into each one of your programs, but before we do, you mentioned something, making a diet really practical, easy to do, well formulated, it's safe, it's effective. You've done this with so many people now. How do you help people? What kind of general things do most people need to know about heading this way? And I also wanted to ask you, lingering from our last question, I was kind of guilty of throwing the terms low carb and ketogenic around almost interchangeably. And I think a lot of people don't understand really the difference. And so if you could tell us some of the general things you recommend for most people who want to try this, who want to do it correctly, want to have a well-formulated diet, what things they can keep in mind to be able to do it. And also, if you could just kind of explain that, yeah, like what the difference between like low carbohydrate and keto really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people kind of use them interchangeably. And then also there are other terms like very low calorie ketogenic diet and low calorie diet or low carbohydrate diet. Like there's just so many terms, a little bit like with fasting, there's so many different terms for different types of fasting. But when it comes to low carbohydrate diet versus ketogenic diet, a low carbohydrate diet is approximately 90 to 130 grams of carbohydrates per day. Quite a lot of carbs. But compared to people who are eating a standard diet, people on the standard diet could be having anything from, 250 to 350 grams of carbohydrates per day. So in comparison to that, 90 to 130 grams is low carb. Okay. Now, you are going to see benefits in terms of physical health if you were to follow a low carbohydrate diet. However, it's for most people not low enough in carbohydrates for you to produce or start to produce ketone molecules. Because if carbohydrates are still present, it gets in the way of your body creating those ketones. So the carbohydrates have to come down a little further. So a ketogenic diet is about 50 grams or less of carbohydrates per day, For most people, it's 20 grams or less. Very few people can get away with like 50 grams of carbohydrates and still produce ketones, especially at a therapeutic level. Though some people, people who train regularly, exercise regularly or heavily, they can often get away with more carbohydrates. So when we're thinking about mental health, we're looking at about 20 grams of carbohydrates or less. That brings down your insulin levels, brings down the carbohydrates, and therefore tells the body, hey, we don't have enough energy coming in from carbohydrates right now. We need a different energy source. So we need to go and create ketones in order to keep ourselves energized. So we have this switch over to creating ketones from fat. The ketones rise, and that's where the term ketogenic diet comes from, right? We create ketones, we can run our body on that, and we are following a ketogenic diet if we have, or if we are producing ketones. So people will say, well, what is a ketogenic diet? A ketogenic diet is anything, any diet that puts you in ketosis. In other words, helps you to produce your own ketones. And if that's 50 grams of carbohydrates or 20 grams of carbohydrates, fine, doesn't matter. So that's the difference between the two. In terms of things that can help people to kind of get started, simple and straightforward is the name of the game, because when people come to me, first of all, their expectations, they have every single egg in this basket, right? Because they are expecting it to take them from 0 to hero very quickly, because we published all the case series and studies that say you can do this in 12 weeks. So we haven't really helped, and so they come expecting that to be the case for them. They also come with all of their symptoms. So they have brain fog, they have all of these things that make it very difficult to be motivated and to make meals, and never mind get a tracking app and download it and manage the tech side of it and fill it out. So in the beginning, it has to be simple, otherwise they're going to run away. So all of my programs and the way I work with people, we focus on education in the beginning, but I give them a food list, and it's the same food list I've used since 2017. Okay, it's the same one that I created back then. And I say, start with this list and eat in this specific way that I teach you from this list. Don't worry about macronutrients, don't worry about calories, just eat from this until you're full. Do not be hungry. And we're going to do this for a few weeks. Then, depending on how quickly they get used to that, then they get their personalized macronutrients from me, and we move into, let's see if we can track the food on the app, so you can learn how many carbohydrates are in your food, how much protein is in your food, and how much fat you have to add to your food to get your ketones up. It's a learning experience, not looking at calories, just looking at what are these macros in my food. But we got to do it in stages. Some people stay on the food list for a long time. Some people just come and listen to the education because that's enough for them. And then other people are like, give me the macronutrients right now. I've got my tracker. My tracker has been open for the past 3 weeks. I've been waiting for you to tell me what to do. Let's go. So you got to kind of adjust based on, how they are when they come in. But food list first usually, and then move on to macros and figuring that out and kind of fine tuning from there, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. I've had so much success like you approaching it in that way. Like, let me just start by giving you some, say, diet doctor recipes or just something. And look through these, look at the pictures, look at, the ingredients, and find an easy one that looks good and just eat it until you're really full. We'll teach you some of this stuff later on. You don't need to understand how this works just yet. We'll teach you that. Just start with this. This is food. It's really good food. If your kids want to have your same taco bowls and they want some carbohydrates with it, great. Cook them up some rice or something. That's totally fine. But you can use this as a base and get the ball rolling and start feeling better. And then later on, you can understand why.
Yeah, exactly. I do that in the exact same way, right? It's do it now, and then usually on like week 6, week 7 of my education, that's when they get all the science, because they can't handle that in week 1. They would run away. We don't even do ketones until week 3, because what's the point? Like, it's just eat the food first, figure out the difference between the margarine and the butter in the supermarket. Like, that's where the focus has to be, and then the rest of it can come afterwards, so just
I
like,
love that.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so you in your program, you've been working with people one-on-one for quite a while. Last time we chatted, I want to say it was maybe your third group cohort. It sounds like that has grown quite a bit. And you also had just completed an online course, which I find really, really interesting. So I'd love to hear about those 3 different programs and any others that you've also created at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So the group program, it was then I renamed it Foundations, okay, because it really does take people from knowing absolutely nothing at all and having that kind of hand-holding approach the whole way through. So that's the 6-month group program that I've been running every 3 months for the past year and a bit now. Um, it's it's just gone from strength to strength, and we still have people now in the community that were in the first group. So, we've got all of their data, like all of their depression and anxiety scores on the scales. We've got like, I think something like 76 weeks worth of that data, and seeing how it's come down and then changed over time. And it's also so wonderful to have some of those people in there now, who have done it for that long and who are feeling good, but still going through the day-to-day challenges of life, because that happens, and how they can then support the new people coming through, and how the new people coming through can see, wow, they've been doing it for this long. It's doable. I can do it too. you know I want to lean on them, etc. So that's wonderful to see, and I'm going to continue to run the foundation program every 3 months. It's quite popular now, so I am even going to be adding in some extra spaces and running some groups kind of at this, like, in parallel. So for example, in November and January, we may have 2 or 3 cohorts starting at the same time, because people want in, and I like to keep the group program or the foundations program, I like to keep the groups kind of small, maybe 10 to 12 people at a time, so that they get to know one another in the beginning, and then also everybody has a time to chat with me each week and have their questions answered and so on. So adding in other cohorts allows for that, because you can still keep the groups quite small, but have more people coming through. So that's going really, really well. And then the online program that you mentioned, that I think I had just finished, or I was just about to launch the last time we spoke. This one I'm the most excited about, because I have worked so hard to put together, something like over 20 hours worth of education and science and resources into this course. So it's for the person who wants to do it on their own, or maybe they've been doing it on their own for a little bit and they want to have some flexibility with it, but also they want to learn. They're curious, they want to learn more than maybe they really need. They want to know all the ins and outs of how everything works, not just the basics. And so that program is for them, and I called it Mastery. And so that's a year long. And so people can come in, they've got the whole year to go through that. And just like the foundations program, we have every single week, we've got 2 occasions where we all get together. It's a Q&A, it's a support call. I answer questions, we catch up, just like what I mentioned earlier about the lady who explained that she, is finally feeling like the depression is lifted after decades. She was in that call today, just giving everybody an update, and people sharing with one another. So the 2 groups, they really complement one another, and ultimately everybody becomes part of the community and has those calls week on, week out, just to update and to get support. Then the one-to-one clients, I'm still seeing those. The nice thing about the one-to-one is, of course, you've got the one-on-one contact, so that person gets my undivided attention and personalized support there. But I couldn't help but then also give them access to the community for that 3 months and access to all of that kind of mastery education, because the community is really the most important thing. People on the one-to-one, they say this is great, but I wish I had friends that were doing this, or I wish I knew people doing this. And I thought, well, hey, I've got this community, so you're invited too. You got to get in there as well and have that experience, and hopefully stick around and support one another there. So that's how it looks now. Everybody pretty much is part of the community, regardless of how they work with me. And I think there's something for everyone. There's the small groups, there's the do it in your own time, especially if you're in a different time zone or time is tight. And then there's the one-on-one, high intensity personalized for people that just want to get stuck in straight away, and get that support. So it's going really, really well. And it's just beautiful to see. The other nice thing about it is the process is more or less the same. The education is more or less the same, just some people get more education and others get less. Excuse me. And so over time, with everybody's consent, I'm collecting all of that, all of the depression scores, all of the anxiety scores, all of the PTSD scores, and charting it out over time. One, to show people, sometimes I'll say, okay, guys, let's look at the chart and you can see if your experience matches what everybody else is experiencing, and that helps. But also so that at some point it can all be collated and it can be then published to show what's possible with these programs. So yeah, it's really, really exciting, and it's going well. Yeah.
That's really exciting. Okay, so I was going to ask you that exact question. So the data that you're collecting from doing these, this is something that can be published at some point, because you must be collecting some very powerful numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. So when anybody comes to join me, in the beginning, they're asked if they give consent for anonymized, of course, like no identifiable information, just the numbers, the scores. If they're asked if they give consent for me to use that in research. And then they're also asked again later on if it's a case study, for example, where there's a little bit more information, like the one I published with the young lady. I went back and asked them again, and I said, listen, I've written it up. What do you think? Does this match? Are you happy with it, etc.? So yeah, everybody that has given permission for me to use that anonymous data, they're in the sheet and it's coming through. So there will be a point where I'll be able to publish that, not individually, but of course as all combined, and show the progress over time for this intervention. It's very
Wow.
exciting. Yeah.
That is super exciting. That's going to be so powerful. I like how you have the different programs and different levels of support. It seems like you could fit anybody. And the way I'll explain it is like, I've got some people who I will drive to their house. I will set up all of their weights. I'll make sure they're doing the right exercises the right way at the right time, and then they can leave. They put almost no thought into it. I do pretty much everything. That costs a little bit more. For other people, maybe I'm just going to write up a plan and I'm going to give that to you, and that's really, really affordable. But I'm not going to be there. You now have to do this. And so it really depends how much, accountability do you want? Do you need? How much coaching do you need? How much motivation do you need? Some people need a lot. Some people need a little. If you need a lot, it's going to cost a little more. And so anybody can kind of be helped in that model, in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why I set it out like that. Of course, one-to-one with more of my time is going to be the highest level. Then the online program, it's over a longer period of time and it's more flexible. So hopefully it's easier to manage. And then the foundations program is at the lowest level because we've got those groups. But at the same time, what happens is if somebody feels like after a month or two, they just need a little extra support, well, then they can go and they can book in a call with me separately. So there's always a bit of a mixing and matching that can be done. I like to have people in programs because I know that the programs work. And therefore, sometimes I get people that come and say, oh, I just want to do like a session every 2 weeks with you or something like this. And I'm like, I would really prefer you to be in a program because I know what you're going to get in the program. I know what kind of support I can give you in the program. I know the length of time is going to be suited to you. Also in terms of availability, you know, if I'm at a conference or I'm traveling, I might miss that person for a week or two. Whereas if they're in the program, they've got the community and they've got the education content. And so there's always something they can be doing and engaging with if I'm not there in that moment. So I much prefer to have people in those programs. And usually there's one that will fit, you know, what they need, their budget, if they want me to be on their side the whole time because they are so nervous or scared about it, of course, then I will do that. But then sometimes you get people that are like, yeah, I think I got this. Like, I just want to, you know, I'll come to the support calls as and when I need, and that should be fine. And that's perfect. That suits them. Yeah.
Yeah, that is perfect. When you're talking about getting somebody's life back, doing one-on-one coaching is, I mean, that's such a cheap investment in you literally transforming your own life. But I would also say, like, if somebody's thinking about it, don't sleep on the group programs because you can get so much help and support, like you've been saying, from other members who have been coming back and they've been in the real world and they understand what it's like when their families aren't supporting them. Their friends think they're nuts or think they're going to have a heart attack. Like those groups can be very, very powerful for a pretty low price point. And again, when you're talking about the consequence of what might happen in somebody's life, like this is an extremely inexpensive investment for the potential upside.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I could never give the support that my clients give to one another. I can't do that. It's not possible. I can guide, I can implement, I can give anecdotes, I can give all of those things, give my professional guidance and expertise, absolutely. And I do that every week in our check-in calls. But then the peer support is invaluable too, because there's Christmas, there's Hanukkah, there's Thanksgiving, there's Canadian Thanksgiving. Like there's all of these different things and different events where you got to be ready. And if you're not ready, you don't have a plan, you might fall off, and then you need the support of everybody to get back on. And
Yeah.
there's also sometimes I might say something and it comes across one way, and then somebody else says it a different way, and that hits different. People understand that more. So we've got people from all over the world, like Finland, Mexico, Australia, all over the place. And with that growing community, you know you're going to resonate with someone. You're going to find your buddy and that's it. You know, you're going to have their support. And so much so that at that conference recently, 3 other people from the IKRT community came and they all organized it together and they all showed up together. And these are people that previously wouldn't have even been really leaving the house often. And they traveled across the country to meet each other in person, attend the conference, and represent, which was lovely to see, like represent, you know, IKRT and the community that has been built. So, you know, they found themselves and they're sorting themselves out and supporting one another, and that's way more than I could do for them. You know, it's
I
just
love that.
cool. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. And like you said, like we know the programs work. We said it earlier. Obviously, we don't know whether this is going to work for everybody. We have to be very careful in the way we talk about this. This is still kind of in its infancy. Yet at the same time, I think you and I both know what happens when people do this, and we know how it's going to turn out. Like we can't exactly say that, but really, like we kind of know it's going to be pretty great for a lot of people. And when I start to see exceptions to that, I might change my tune a little bit, but it's pretty powerful stuff. It's hard to find people that doesn't work for.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, even from the physical health side, the physical health improves. If they're on medications, the side effects of their medications are dampened or they're not experiencing them anymore. So even if it doesn't take them 100% of the way, it will still take them somewhat of the way. And we just don't know how far that is when the person presents themselves. But
Yeah.
from my perspective and from your perspective, it is worth doing if you do it properly, it is worth doing because you are highly likely to see improvements, both physical and mental. We just don't know by how much. But still, something is definitely better than nothing, with the potential chance to really see an incredible turnaround.
Amazing. Yeah. It's so funny. We've been talking for over an hour and we didn't even hardly until the very end, we didn't even mention some of the physical things that can happen. Like what if your mental health improves by only 75% and you lost 50 pounds? Like, come on, like it's so cool.
Yeah.
Erin, this has been another amazing conversation. I just get so positive when I chat with you and see the work that you're doing and it's getting out and yeah, it's like we said, slower than we would like for sure, but it is getting out there and you're a huge part of that. And I've just really enjoyed our conversation. Can't wait to host you again down the road so we can see what else new is going on. But for now, Erin, where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Casey. I mean, I think we could probably talk for hours and hours and hours.
Hours,
We gotta
hours.
run it up. Yeah. It's been a pleasure as always. You can find me at ikrt.org. You can find me on all the usual social platforms. So Erin Louise Bellamy, just pop me into Google and I'll turn up. And if anybody's interested in, joining any of the programs or getting in touch, please, please, please do email. You can email hello@ikrt.org. You will come across Natalie, my wonderful practice manager. She's just absolutely brilliant. She's so lovely. And it's just her and I working away. So please get in contact, and we'll see how we can help and support you. But yeah, Casey, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you again. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's such an honor. Again, we just really, really love your work and how you're changing the world one person at a time. So congratulations to you. Thank you so very much for everything that you do. And thank you for taking time to be on our show again today. We really appreciate you.
No worries. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.